Masechet Baba Batra Daf He. Nu Mishnah. המקיף את חברו משלוש רוחותיו, וגדל את הראשונה ואת השנייה ואת השלישית, אין מחייבין אותו. רבי יוסי אומר, אם עמד וגדל את הרביעית, מגלגלין עליו את הכל. We have a situation of two people. One owns an inner plot of land, and another one owns the land all around it, all surrounding it on all sides. And the owner of the outer one goes and makes a partition between the inner and the outer. So he's making a partition over here along 1, 2, and 3 sides of the between him and his neighbor. So can he come and ask the inner guy, hey, can you pay me? Look, I made a fence around your field, so I helped you, right? And the inner guy can say, no, not really. Look, I still have an open side on the fourth wall, so thieves and animals, anybody can come get in. Therefore, your 3 walls, they may benefit you, right? Sure, the outer guy, he probably is going to make another, fence around here and all around and whatever. That's good for him. But the inner guy says, it doesn't help me at all. I still have an open one, and therefore I do not have to contribute to your fence. That's the opinion of Tanakama. Tanakama doesn't say what would happen if one of them built the 4th fence as well. So presumably, since they say he doesn't have to pay regarding the 3, if he built the 4th one, then the inner guy would have to pay something. But Rabbi Yosef is explicit about that case. If someone got up, it's not clear who, im Ahmad, is it the outside guy or the inside guy? Maybe since it says Ahmad, it sounds like the inside guy then goes and says, hey, you know what? There's already 3 sides here for cheap. I could just build one side, and then I'll be all guarded. Okay, the Gemara will discuss who builds this 4th wall. Anyway, whoever builds it, once that 4th wall is built, then we require the inner guy to pay for all of them, for all 4 walls. It's true, before let's say the inner guy built the 4th wall, so then the inner guy says, I have no benefit from the 3 walls. Okay, fine, so he doesn't pay anything. But then, once the inner guy goes and pays for the 4th wall, that shows that he really wants his field to be guarded, and now he does benefit from all 4 of the walls, so he has to pay for half the amount for all 4. That would be the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. In what way would Tanakama disagree? That's an important question. The Gemara is going to propose several answers to that. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Halacha Rabbi Yosef Amar Im Amad vegadar et haribi'it megalgelin alav et hakol lo shena amad nikaf lo shena amad makif. So right now we're skipping right to the end of the conclusion of the understanding of Rabbi Yosef, although this is anticipating some of the discussion that we're going to have soon. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shemuel, first of all, halacha follows Rabbi Yosef, not Tanakama, and Rabbi Yosef said, if he gets up and builds the 4th wall, then he has to pay for all of them. And he clarifies, it doesn't matter whether the inside guy builds that 4th wall or the outside guy builds that 4th wall. Even if the outside guy does, then the outside guy can come and say, listen, now you have benefit. You have of being guarded on all sides, so you have to pay for half of all 4 of the walls. That's the halacha. Itamar, Rav Huna amar hakol lefi ma shegadar, Chia bar Rav amar hakol lefi demeh kanim bezo. Now, when we make the inside guy pay, according to the Rabbi Yosef, there's 2 opinions about how much he has to pay. Rav Huna says he has to pay for the amount of the cost of the partition, half of it. So if it costs the outside guy $100 per wall, and whatever he made it out of, then the inside guy is going to have to pay $50 per wall. However, Chia Bar Rav says, no, when he pays for all of them, he only pays for making a partition out of the cheapest thing, out of reeds, because the inside guy says, yes, I am happy that I'm guarded, that I have walls all around, also good for privacy, but if I would have built it, I would have made it out of very, very cheap material, just reeds. That would have cost, $10 each wall. So therefore, I'm only paying you $5 for each wall. So you see, if you follow Rav Huna, within the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, that's going to be the most stringent, the most payment for the inside guy. Chia Bar Rav is going to be somewhat less. Tanakama may be even less, as we'll see. Now, first, we're going to quote our Mishnah as a challenge to one of those two opinions. Tenan, hamakif et chavero mishalosh ruchotav vegadar et harishona ve'et hasheniya ve'et hashelishit en mechayevin oto ha'revi'it mechayevin oto. So if we look at Tanakama in our Mishnah of someone who is surrounding his neighbor and he builds 3 walls, the inside guy does not have to pay. So we can infer from this that if he built 4 walls, then the inside guy would have to pay. Now, how do we reconcile that with the sefa? Ema sefa Rabbi Yosef Omer. Im amad vegadar et haribi'it megadgalin alav et hakol. Rabbi Yosef says if he builds the 4th wall, then the inside guy will have to pay for all four of them, at least something, towards the building of all 4 of them. Now, Bishlam al Rav Huna damar hakol lefi ma shegadar ba. Hainu dika ben Tanakama veRabbi Yosef. Tanakama sabar hakol lefi demekanim bezol in ma shegadar la. VeRabbi Yosef sabar hakol lefi ma shegadar. Now, we can reconcile and explain the difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yosef just fine according to Rav Huna, who says, in explanation of Rabbi Yosef, that we follow the amount that the outside guy actually spent, the actual cost of the wall. And then that would explain the difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yosef. According to Tanakama, the inside guy only has to pay the cheapest amount if it were made out of reeds. He could say, I only would have made 4 walls out of reeds. But he would not have to pay based on the cost of what the outside guy actually spent. That's the opinion of Tanakama. And Rabbi Yosef says that we look at the actual cost that the outside guy spent, and the inside guy has to pay for half of the cost for all 4 of the walls. So Rav Huna can easily account for the difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yosef. Ela lechiya ba'arav damar hakol lefi demekanim bezol ma'ika ben Tanakama l'Rabbi Yosef. I demekanim bezol la kayehible ma'ika yehible. But according to Chiya bar Rav, who says that according to the Yosef, the inside guy only has to pay for the cost of reeds, then what would be the difference between Tanakama and the Yosef? If the inside guy does not have to pay even for the cost of reeds, according to Tanakama, because we assume Tanakama is less stringent on him than the Yosef, then what is he giving? What's cheaper than that? And now we're going to have one answer and more answers coming. I ba'et ema agar netira ika benaihu Tanakama sabar agar netira in demekanim bezol la veRabbi Yosef sabar demekanim bezol. There is in fact something cheaper than making a wall out of reeds, and that's paying a watchman. This is like the cheapest labor. Just get a guy to sit and watch and scare away some birds or animals should they come. And so that would be the difference, the wages of a watchman. According to Tanakama, once someone builds the 4th wall, I guess it wouldn't matter who builds the 4th wall, then the inside guy has to pay for the cost of a watchman, because that's what he would have had to pay anyway if there was no wall there. Certainly he has to pay a watchman if he cares about the produce that's growing inside, but he does not have to pay, not for reeds. But the Rabbi Yosef comes and says that he disagrees, and he says the inside guy, once the 4th wall is built, has to pay for a partition made out of reeds. But no one says that he has to pay for half of the full cost of it. Okay, so that is another answer. So actually we had an answer for Rav, according to Rav Huna, and this is the first answer that will fit with Chiya bar Rav. And now we have yet another one. Tanakama sabar levi'itu diyahiv le aval rishona sheniya ushlishit la yahiv le veRabbi Yosef sabar rishona sheniya ushlishit nami yahiv le. Or maybe the difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yosef is regarding payment for the first 3 walls. Tanakama says that once someone builds the 4th wall, then the inside guy has to pay for a part of that 4th wall. But he doesn't have to pay for the first 3 walls, because he says, when you built those 3 walls, they were not benefiting me. I never wanted them. So that's it. You paid for them. That's done. That's past history. And now, you're building a 4th wall. This 4th wall does benefit me. Okay, I'll pay something. Whereas Rabbi Yosef thinks that it's true. When there's only 3 walls, the inside guy doesn't have to pay anything. But once the 4th wall is built, then all 4 walls are benefiting supporting him, and then the inside guy has to contribute towards all four walls. Makif nikaf ika benaihu. Tetana kama sober ta'amad amad nikaf demegalgelin alav et hakol. Aval amad makif eno noten lo ela demerivi'it. Or yet another answer, maybe the difference between them is whether it's the outside guy or the inside guy that builds the fourth wall. According to Tanakama, only if the inside guy builds the fourth wall, then he shows that he wants walls to guard his field, and then he has to pay for part of all four of the walls. However, if the outside guy is the one that builds the three walls and he also builds the fourth wall, then the inside guy only has to pay for part of the fourth wall, because he can say, listen, you built the first three walls for yourself, and they had no benefit to me at that time, and that's ancient history. You built them all. Now that you build the fourth wall, now I do have benefit. Fine, I'll share in the cost of the fourth wall, but not the rest of them. So that's Tanakama v'Rabbi Yosef Sabar la shena nikaf v'la shena makif. Im amad vegadar megalgelin alav et hakol. Rabbi Yosef says, doesn't matter whether the inside guy or the outside guy is the one that builds the fourth wall. And once it's built, no matter who builds it, the inside guy is benefiting from all four of the walls at that point, and therefore has to share the cost in all four of them. And last answer is similar to the previous one, except it's flipped around. And this one, Tanakama is actually more stringent on the inside guy than Rabbi Yosef. Lishana charina. Makif nikaf ika benaihu. Tanakama sabar im gadar makif et harebe'it name yahib le. According to this version, it's also the difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yosef is whether the outside or inside guy built the fourth wall. But in this version, Tanakama thinks that if the outside guy builds the fourth wall, then also the inside guy has to pay. And certainly if the inside guy built the fourth wall, they has to pay for all of them. Rabbi Yosef sabar im amad nikaf gadar et harebi'it hu diyahib le tegalida te denichale abalim gadar makif la yahib le midi. However, Rabbi Yosef thinks that if the inside guy built the fourth wall, then he has to contribute to that, certainly at least that fourth wall. It's not clear if all the other walls also, because then he shows that he wants it to be there. Then the inside guy built it, so obviously he wants it to be there. However, if the outside guy built all four of them, then the inside guy does not have to pay anything at all. You could say, I never wanted any of this. Now we have a story. Ronya akefer rabina me'arba ruchotav. Amar le, habli kama de gadri la yahib le. Habli lefi kanim bezol la yahib le. Habli agar netiruta la yahib le. Ronya had an inside field, and Ravina, the great sage, he was surrounding Ronya on all four sides. And so Ravina made a wall all around between himself and Ronya. So this is Ravina is all around and built walls on all four sides of Ronya's lot, which was inside them. And Ravina says, pay me for these walls, right? And you should pay me according to the cost. Pay half the cost. And Ronya says, no, I don't want them. I'm not paying for them. Ravina says, okay, at least pay for for partitions made out of reeds. You could say, okay, I would be sufficient with reeds. Pay at least that much. And Ronya said, no, he's cheapskate. Doesn't want to pay anything. Okay, fine. Pay me for the watchman. You would have had to pay a watchman all day to watch your vegetables, and now you don't have to pay that. So at least give me the wages of a watchman that now you don't have to pay. And Ronya didn't want to pay anything at all. One day, Ronya was harvesting dates inside his inner garden there, and Ravina told his sharecropper, listen, go grab a cluster of dates from Ronya on the inside there. Azala tuyerema bekala. So the sharecropper goes and grabs a bunch of dates, and what do you know? Ronya starts yelling at him, hey, stop, those are my dates. Amale galita dahatach demenach nichalach la yehe ela iza be'alma mila ba'enetiruta. And so Ravina on the outside says, see, Ronya, you do care that you want your garden to be guarded, and even if it were not my share sharecropper, even if it was just a goat that entered your field and might start eating something, right? Don't you need some kind of safeguarding? Listen, you don't have to worry about me. I'm not going to come and steal from you, and neither are any of my workers, but a goat might come in. And so you see that you do care about. This is not just like a patch of land that you let grow wild and you don't care what happens there. And Ronya says in answer to everything, he says, what, a goat? Well, it just needs to be chased away. So I'll yell at it, just like I yelled at your sharecropper. So I'll yell at it. It doesn't cost me anything. But Ravina says, don't you have to hire someone to chase away the goat? Was you going to stay here all day and all night to chase away goats? You're going to have to hire someone. You should pay me something. The case came to Rava as a judge. And so Rava tells Ronya, go and appease him with that which he would accept. He said he'll accept the least amount, the amount just for wages. It's very cheap. So you may as well just pay him something. You are benefiting from him and you're getting a good deal out of it. And if you don't agree to that, then I'm going to make a judgment and I'm going to follow the most stringent opinion that we saw above, which is the opinion of Rav Huna. According to the Biyoseh, according to that, I'm going to make you pay for half of the cost for all 4 walls. So you may as well give something. It doesn't say what happened in the end. Presumably, Ronya said, okay, fine. And he went and paid something. All right, it's interesting that this conversation here, he says, give me the half the amount. Give me the reeds. Give me the watchman. This is the same as the Ibayat Emaz that we just saw. It almost seems like Ravina learned that Gemara of all those Ibayat Emaz and he's following them. More likely, it's actually the other way around, that the story came first. Ravina presented these different options, and then based on these different options, the later Gemara says, oh, we can use these different options to explain the difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef is always one level above the opinion of Tanakama. Okay, one last story about Ronya also. Ronya Zeban Misra de Ravina. Ronya one day bought the land right next door to Ravina. So presumably this story is after the previous one. Seba Ravina de Saluke Mishum Dina de Bar Misra. Now Ravina has a right to send Ronya away and take that land because Ravina is the neighbor, and that's the law. Neighbor always has a first right to buy land that is sold next to him, and therefore really the seller should have offered it to Ravina first, but if not, then Ronya is considered as a messenger buying it on behalf of Ravina. So Ravina says, how much did you pay? Good, I'll pay you the same. Thank you for being my real estate agent, and Ravina can take that land. He has a right to do so. And you'd expect, after what happened before, after Ronya was giving him such a hard time and being such a cheapskate, this would be Ravina's chance to get a little bit of revenge in. Amar le Rav da Safra bered Rav Yiba de Ravina Amri Nashe Arba'a Lisala Arba'a Lislala. However, Rav Safra, the son of Rav Yiba, told Ravina, this is a folk saying, that 4 for a tanner of large hides, 4 for a tanner of small hides. Okay, very cryptic statement. What does this mean? There's a lot of different opinions about it. We'll follow the opinion of the Rimigash, who says whether someone is a rich tanner or a poor tanner, everybody gets 4 amot in the grave. In other words, it doesn't really matter whether one is rich or poor, how much you have, because everybody goes to the same place. The point being here, listen, Ravina, you have a perfect right to claim this land and kick Ronya out. And so it's a legal right. And even morally, from the way he treated you last time, we understand. However, listen, Ronya, poor guy, he needs this land, and it will benefit you, yes. You'll get a little bit richer from taking this land. But who cares, right? Everybody's the same at the end, and therefore, be nice and let Ronya have the land. He can use it more than you can, and leave it alone. And especially, don't treat him like he treated you. Take the high road. And again, we don't know what happened in the end, but presumably Ravina said, okay, and he let Ronya stay. Next Mishnah, Kotel Haser Shenafal Mechayvin Oto Libnoto Ad 4 Amot Bechizkat Shenatan Ad Sheyavi Re'aya Shelo Natan. If two neighbors had a wall between their courtyards in a place where it's customary to build a courtyard, so good, they have a wall between them, and now it falls down. So each one can obligate the other to share in the cost of rebuilding it. However, that's only true up to 4 amot. Even if the original wall was higher, was 6 amot, they don't have to build it as high as the original wall, but up to 4 amot they do. 4 amot, about 6 feet, that's enough that a normal person standing up, won't be able to see into their neighbor. Now, we assume that the payment for the original wall was given, unless there's proof that it was not given. In other words, if one of the neighbors says, listen, you never paid your share of that wall back when we built it 3 years ago. Why should we should not, we don't believe him if he brings proof. Hey, you never paid, right? See, I have the receipts here. Then the neighbor who didn't pay has to pay. But without any proof, we assume that it was back then they paid, because no neighbor would go and spend all the money building a wall if the other guy didn't come and contribute to half of it. He would have made sure to collect the money at that time. Now, sefa me'arba amot ulmalan en mechayevin oto. But if it's higher, to make it higher than 4 amot, one neighbor cannot force the other to do so. Even if the original wall was 6 amot high, then now we could say, listen, I know the first one was 6, happened to be so, but I only want to build a 4 amot high one. It's smaller, it's cheaper, then that's all he can make him do. Samach lo kotel acher, af al pi shelo natan alav et hatikra, megalgelin alav et hakol, bechazkat shelo natan, ad sheyavi re'aya shenatan. However, if the reluctant neighbor, after he says, no, I don't want to build it higher, I only want to build 4 feet, but the neighbor that wants it higher makes it 6 feet at his own expense. After that, the reluctant neighbor builds another wall, let's say perpendicular on his land to that wall, and he makes it also 6 amot high, meaning he wants to put a roof on it, and so he's benefiting from the extra height of that wall that's between them. In that case, even if he didn't yet put a roof on it, just the fact that he built another wall and high means that he likes having this wall high, and therefore then we make him go back and pay for half of the extra height of the wall as well. Now in this case, if the reluctant neighbor says, oh, I already paid for that extra height, we do not believe him until he brings a proof that he paid for it, because in this case he did not have an obligation to pay for it. So the neighbor who actually built it would have paid for it by himself and would not have made sure to get paid that share from the reluctant neighbor. So that's the difference of the chazakah between the resha and the sefa. Amar Resh Lakish, hakobeh zeman lechavero, amar lo peraticha betoch zemani eno ne'eman ulvai sheyifra bizmano. We're going to compare these two chazakot with a case of a loan. And Resh Lakish says, if someone lends money to someone else and sets a deadline, you have to pay by January 1st. And then, let's say, January 1st comes, and the lender says, pay me, and the borrower says, I already paid you in October. I paid you before the deadline. That borrower is not believed. People don't pay early. If only we wish that people would actually pay on time all their debts. They barely do that. People aren't going to pay early. If you have more time, then you're going to keep the money until it's time the deadline comes. And therefore we don't believe him to say I paid early. That's the opinion of Resh Lakish. Abaye v'Ravad amre tarvayhu. Abidi nishtepara begoz zimne. Zimni dimitzramu lezuzeh. Amar izil ifre'eh. Ki hechi dela li tardan. However, Abaye and Ravad, they disagree, and they say sometimes people do pay early before the deadline, because sometimes you get some money, you made a good business deal, and you have money with you, and you say, let me go repay my debt so that I don't have to deal with it later. I don't want to trouble myself. Sometimes your Amex bill is due on the due date. You say, I don't want to wait all to due date. I have money now. I'll pay it off so that I don't get distracted with something else. I don't have to deal with it later. Okay, now we're going to try to bring a proof in support of Abaye and Rava from our Mishnah. Tenan. Bechizkat shenatan ad shevi ra'aya shelo natan. Hechi dameh. Ilem adamar leperaticha bizmani, peshita bechizkat shenatan. Ela lav damar leperaticha betoch zemani. Al mavidinish difra'e betoch zemane. With our Mishnah, the Resha says that for the bottom 4 amot, where one has to share, we assume that they did in fact pay, unless you bring one of the neighbors brings proofs that he didn't pay. Now, what would be the case if he's claiming that, if he says, I paid on time, I paid at the time that I was expected to, then obviously we believe him, because people generally do pay at the deadline. But so the Mishnah wouldn't have to teach us anything. That would be an obvious case. Rather, it must be the Mishnah is talking about a case where one of the neighbor who's the defendant says, "Oh, I paid early. I paid before the deadline." And you see, chazakah, he is believed. We can derive from here that sometimes people do pay early, and therefore we should be believed. That's a proof for Abaye and Rava. Challenge to Resh Lakish, and Resh Lakish answers, Shaneh hachad dekol safa v'safa zimnehu. No, here it's different. There's no fixed deadline for when one has to pay for the entire wall. Rather, each and every row of bricks, you have to pay as for each row. After all, you're going to have to pay the workers, the material, as it goes up. So it's not like the due date is only when the whole thing is finished, and says, well, I paid early. In fact, there's no early or late because there's no fixed deadline. One has to continue paying the entire time. And therefore, Resh Lakish says, I would agree that one is believed because it's not that he paid early. That whole time is the right time to pay. Ta'ashema bechezka shelo natan ad shiyavi re'aya shenatan. Now we quote the sefa as a proof for Resh Lakish. For the the higher amount, more than 4 amot, person, the reluctant neighbor, he says, I don't want it, doesn't have to pay. But then when he builds a wall, a wall extending out of it, then he does have to pay because it shows he wanted it. Now, if he claims that he paid for it, we do not believe him until he brings proof that he paid, because he never had to pay for this to begin with, when that wall was first made. Now, hechidami, what are the details of this case? Ilem adam ale peraticha bizmani amai lo, la lav damar le peraticha betoch zemani, alma la abid inish de para begozimne. If he says, I paid it at that time, at the due date, then why is he not believed? He paid at the due date. Most people pay by the deadline. Rather, it must be that he says, I paid early. Therefore, and we see this part of Mishnah says he's not believed. Therefore, we see that people don't pay early. Proof for Resh Lakish challenge to Abaye and Rava. However, Abaye and Rava can answer, Shaneh hachad amar mi emar demechayevu li rabbanan. No, over here, it doesn't, people generally will pay early if it's like a loan that they borrowed, and they definitely will have to pay. But here, the reluctant neighbor would say, who says that the rabbis are going to make me pay? After all, when my neighbor first made those higher 2 amot, I didn't have to pay then because I didn't want it. And now I built another wall. Who knows? Is it going to come to court? Is it going to be brought there? What will they judge? Maybe they'll say I have to pay. Maybe they won't say I have to pay. He's not going to prepay before a judgment that says he has to pay, and therefore there's no chance in that case that likelihood is very small that he paid before the deadline. So even Abaye and Rava would agree in this case, but this is not the same as a case of a loan, where if you know that you're going to have to pay for sure, and you have money available, then many people will, in fact, prepay to not have to deal with it later. Finally, Rav Papa and Rav Yoshua Abdika, Abaye and Rava. Rav Papa and Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, they followed Abaye and Rava. Mor bar Rav Asher, Abid keresh Lakish. But Mor Rav Asher, he followed the halacha as Resh Lakish. Vilcheta keresh Lakish, afilu miyatmeh. Halacha fails Resh Lakish that if someone claims that they paid before the deadline, we don't believe them. And let's say that guy, that borrower who claimed that, died, and now the lender comes to the orphans to collect. He can collect even without making a vow, because we assume that the borrower, the guy who died, did not pay before the deadline. And even if he or the orphans claim, oh, our father paid before the deadline, no, that doesn't happen. We follow the Resh Lakish. ימים לא ייפרע אלא בשבועה, חזקה לעביד איניש דפרע בגוז זמנה. And even though the master says that when someone wants to get paid from orphans, he cannot get paid unless he makes a vow, but in this case, the lender does not have to make a vow because we have a presumption that people don't pay early before the deadline, and therefore he can collect in this case even without a vow. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.